Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I have so many stories to tell I almost don't think they would all fit. My first experiences, I would have to say, started after we moved into a house we lived in for about 7 years. I was 5. The house was located in between the foothills and mountains of California in a small town called Northfork. The house was pretty big. A 2-story with 11.3 acres of land that had 2 rivers. The house was made from trees that were cut down on its own property. From day one, that house gave off an ominous, foreboding, and just downright creepy feeling. I never in my whole life slept in that house without something happening. And I always had to have some sort of light source. I would say my first experiences there were the footsteps. My room was the first one downstairs and down the hall. I would hear footsteps start above the kitchen, where the loft was located. Not my parents' room, mind you, but the loft. And hear them come down the stairs, down the hall, and they'd stop at my bedroom door. Once in a while I would see a shadow walk past. A few times I got up the courage to peer out the door, seeing nothing. Other than the footsteps, I would hear whispering. A lot of whispering, and I was never able to make out any words. I would ask my parents almost every night if they had come downstairs for anything. And it was almost always a no. One night I was laying with my back facing my bedroom door and staring at my wall, making little shadows with my hands from my nightlight, when I heard the footsteps again. This time they almost seemed to drag. I stopped moving and pulled the blanket up over my shoulder and listened. As they reached the hall, a small scratching sound went down the wall, like someone was dragging their hand along the wall while they walked. I heard my door move across the carpet, and all of a sudden this looming feeling of, I don't know, just a heaviness fell over me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was so thick. I held my breath to listen, and then I rolled over and saw nothing. I sat up in bed and stared at my now fully open door and saw nothing that I had felt behind me. I crawled into my little brother's bed in the room next to mine and slept with him that night. Other than those, I would hear screams coming from upstairs when my parents were gone. Me and my little brother would look upstairs and creep up on them, and of course find nothing. In the middle of the day. It was just very scary to experience at young ages. There were also aberrations of a young girl and a young boy dressed in the garb of probably pioneer days. The girl wore a white dress with the ruffles around the throat, and she was always extremely mad. Always angry, and she scared me. She scared me so bad. I would see her in the reflections in the windows on the stairs. I never could be in the living room at night without the light above the stairs being on. The boy, on the other hand, just seemed normal. He had a hat, I remember that. Not a hat like now, it was a little floppy and brown. The kind shown in the picture. The only time I ever heard him talk was a few days before we had to move. He said, "Please don't go," and vanished. Another few experiences I had happened down at one of the rivers. Me and my little brother went down to play one day, and our dogs went with us. Before we went around a turn, the dogs had run off in the brush, and my brother ran ahead a little ways. I stopped in my tracks, seeing a man in a cowboy hat sitting on top of a horse. He was wearing dusty boots with a holster around his waist with a gun. His eyes were very hard, and he had a scowl on his face. I remember calling to my brother, who only looked at me confused, but looked to where I was staring, and I remember seeing his face almost drain. He ran over to me, and I put my arm around him while pushing him behind me. I remember yelling up at him that my dad wouldn't be happy with him trespassing on our property and he better leave. But I felt this cold push against my chest and nothing but pure fear. I turned my brother around and told him to run. I walked backwards until he was out of my sight before I turned my back on him to run for myself. We told my dad, who went down to check things out, and he never found the man. or any signs of a horse walking around in the sand of the path. Me and my brother have heard whispers and giggles and talking around us many times while we played in the river. I heard yelling and gruff men's voices and other things as well. When we had to sell the house was when we finally got to learn some stuff about the history of the land. There were some spots on the property where I felt safe and completely at peace, and other spots I would never touch again. I would have constant bad dreams that still haunt me to this day in our backyard. Of the loft, my room. The stairs. Dreams of large black dogs with red eyes that circled the house and killed my parents before they could make it to the front door from the car. The first but not the last time I dreamed of these dogs. But what we learned was interesting to what I had seen. The land before was a home to the Mono Indians who had lived there before. I found many arrowheads in my time. There was said to be a burial ground somewhere on the property. Personally, I think it's one of the spots that I felt safe in. On top of a hill that overlooked our house was a perfect encircling of trees. A perfect circle. My brother used to have picnics there. Another thing we learned was that the river used to be panned for gold. It was a train station and it also held an old saloon, brothel. It explains some things I think. After we sold our house, my family fell to tragedy. My little brother died after a car wreck where my father's truck went against a diesel that fled the scene to leave behind my dad to take the entire rap. The 3 months I spent in the hospital left me relearning how to walk while high off morphine at the age of 12. I was told my brother was dead on the 3rd day in. I was wheeled up to his room in my bed the day before they told me so I could visit him because I was hysterical and I had to see him. They already knew he was dead but didn't tell me. That night I was alone in my room. I didn't cry, and I feel horrible for not crying. But my entire nerve and emotional system was numb from everything they had been pumping into my veins. I don't know the exact time, but I know it was way after midnight. I had a balloon fly around my room. It had a weight on it. It was standing stationary beside my bed the entire day. But that night it flew around my room. I cried then. I felt this warm presence. But at the same time I couldn't feel it. It felt like giggles? Happy giggles? As my balloon floated around and around in circles. The next morning I woke up to it being left at the right side, end of my bed. It was on the right side that my body was injured. I think it was my little brother. After that, all my experiences have been almost demonic. If anyone has any interests in those, or not sleeping, let me know. So after everything else that followed after I was released from the hospital and from CPS, I moved back in with my parents. At the time we lived in a small camper off my great aunt's property, and after she moved to the next town over we got to take over the mobile home she lived in. We were out in the country outskirts of the town I live in now. And it was surrounded by pistachio orchards and a big river. My room was on the complete opposite end of the mobile home from my parents, and they didn't really seem to have much time for me. The death was hard on my brother. They were never really mentally there afterwards. Not till probably a couple years ago did they realize they lost about 6 years with me. So I was lonely, as anyone else would be. My little brother was my best friend. We went everywhere together, did everything together. I spent a lot of my time crying, and I wasn't even allowed to speak about him in earshot of my parents. They would go ballistic. One night as I was crying, I felt a soft warm hand on my shoulder and a weight sitting on my bed. I told my mom I was sorry, but when I rolled over I didn't see anyone there. But the weight was still implanted on my bed and I still felt the warmth of a loving mother. I looked around but I still couldn't see anything. No ball of light, no aberration, nothing. So I asked softly who it was, and a delicate woman's voice whispered back, Elaine. Or Ellen. I could never figure it out. So for the 1.5 years I lived there I felt her. Some nights my room gave off such a fiery hate aura that I had to sleep in the recliner in the living room because it scared me so bad. And other times it was that warm, soothing feeling I had experienced the first night. Why they only give information on deaths on the location after you move away from a place I'll never understand. But a long while ago, one of the previous owners to the land. They were a young couple. The husband was a horrible alcoholic and beat his wife constantly. Ended up killing her, so I believe it was her. One night I was doing my homework in the living room. My dad was passed out from taking a bunch of pills and my mom was passed out from drinking. I was eating something. A sandwich or cereal. Maybe mac and cheese, I don't know. Whatever I made myself when I heard my name. I remember sitting up, setting my food and math book down and standing out of the recliner and turning around to face the kitchen to see if my parents needed help or something because, well, alcohol and drugs, they can barely walk. No one there. I started at the empty kitchen when I heard a loud whisper in my ear call my name. I spun around and my light was on in my bedroom. For some reason I didn't feel any fear. So I walked in slowly. My eyes wide open looking for anything. I sat down on my bed and watched a cobweb above my light. It was still. I asked if it was her and to show me a sign so I could see. The cobweb moved softly, like someone gently blew on it. I asked her if she needed help. It moved again. I asked her if she wanted me to find someone. It held still. Asked a few more questions, nothing. Asked her if she knew she was dead. It was hesitant but moving. Asked her if she wanted help over. It blew so hard half of it fell. After I asked, my heart started to pound like mad. And the feeling in the room just seemed very thick. Warm and very thick. I was only 13 at this time. I wasn't exactly sure what to say or do. I told her she wasn't alive anymore and that her time had come to pass. Told her to not be afraid, that people were waiting for her and would help lead her home. Told her to see a white light to go home. She was safe now. And some more stuff I just can't remember at all. All of a sudden I felt this hug envelope me, it squeezed me and my entire soul felt full and I had tears streaming down my cheeks, and then like that it was gone. My light was off. My room was dark. It felt extremely empty. And for the first time in a year I felt completely alone. For some people, it's really hard to explain. When you constantly feel something near, you know something's there. And then there will be absolutely nothing. It's a very empty feeling. I remember crying, sobbing really. For her, because once again I was all alone. I never had any other experiences in that house. We moved into an apartment in the town and my mom ended up throwing my dad in jail for domestic abuse. While he was in jail she started dating the neighbor. He gave off a very untrusting feeling. His eyes seemed too bright and way too quick to dart around. Like he was keeping something to himself. I ended up living with my grandparents because I couldn't stand him and my mom. After everything settled and my parents worked it out, me and my dad ended up moving back in with my mom, who had moved to a different apartment, the one I live in now. The apartment's owners before her was her ex-boyfriend's parents. And the guy's mom told my mom to salt around the house, to hang crosses, to take precautions, and my mom didn't. Lucky me, right? So my room is the one in the back on the left. It wasn't clean enough by my mom's standards for me to live in yet, so the first couple months I stayed in the living room. After some serious cleaning I finally got to move my furniture from my grandparents' house into my new room. The first few things I noticed was my room never felt safe to me. It felt like it wanted me out. It felt very unwelcoming and it was always cold. Even today there are gray handprints and smudges on my walls that are unscrubbable. Now here is where the true terrors of my life begin. There was a ton of noises. Breathing, steps, scratching, growling, whispers, laughs, cursing, yelling. Lots of things like that. My clothes in my closet would move. Things in my room would move or disappear only to reappear elsewhere. I had no pets at this time. My bed was located under my window straight across from my closet. My closet doors were removed long ago and I can see into it just fine. I swear, on my brother's grave I watched things move in there. I saw the shadows leak out. I saw the hands holding the closet frame and I felt them. I ended up sleeping with a lamp in my closet and a lamp in my room. At night I would hear scratching under my bed. I had a daybed, steel framework, and the underside was this, strong nylon? With the support bars underneath for the mattress. I would hear nails scratch the nylon. And feel it move under me. On more than one night my blankets were pulled under my bed and I watched my bedroom door close by itself. I ended up sleeping in the recliner in the living room for 8 months. Then it started following me to the living room. The shadows would stay in the hallway where it was dark and reach out and stretch to me. My parents were fed up with me sleeping in the living room and told me to use my own room. That's why I had one. So I had to go back to my own room. By this time I had gotten a young cat from a moving neighbor. She ended up going crazy. Literally crazy. She would seem almost possessed. She hissed and scratched and when I got her she was fine. She would not leave my room. She scratched up my walls where the handprints were. She tore apart my posters that covered them and she would sit in front of my closet with her back arched hissing. One day she got outside. And I never saw her again.
I've got quite a few from the first home I lived in. A lot of creepy shit went down there, but it all stopped after we moved when I was 11. The first time anything happened I was 4. Both my parents were at work and my grandpa was supposed to be watching me. It was only like 8 a.m. though, so he wasn't awake yet and I wouldn't normally be either. I woke up terrified. I have no idea why. I immediately backed myself into a corner. I was apparently in the living room. I sat there for maybe about 10 minutes just scared shitless. Pure unimaginable fear as far as I can remember, no fucking reason. After a little bit I started hearing noises from the hall. This huge ass monster that looked really similar to those things from Where the Wild Things Are just walked into view. I didn't give it time to do anything. I ran outside barefoot and in my white tighties. It was pouring rain and there might have even been thunder. I ran a block away to my friend Evan's house. I pounded on their door for like 4 solid minutes. By the time his mom opened it I was fucking soaked. I refused to tell her why I did this. Even at 4 I was afraid of what somebody would think. My siblings were horrible when I was afraid. She ended up calling my mom, giving me clothes, and I was sent back home. My mom left shortly after. I spent the next couple hours completely fucking terrified that it would come back. I was so scared to move that I didn't even go to wake up my grandpa. I never saw it again. Also, when I was 4 I can remember the exact moment where I was given a fear of death. I was walking home with my sister and I was remembering one of the Child's Play movies, you know, with the killer doll. And it occurred to me, that doll was killing people. Ending their lives. Just like Grandma. And I instantly felt ill. Well, I made the mistake of telling my sister and then everyone knew. Well, my cousin and my brother thought it'd be funny to turn on one of the Child's Play movies and lock me in the room. I was pounding on the door screaming. My parents weren't home. After about 20 minutes of crying I heard something from behind the bed. I looked closer and I could see the silhouette and face of a kid about my age. Just smiling. I started screaming way louder and pounding on the door with a lamp and they finally let me out. To this day I won't watch any killer doll, puppet movies. When I was about 8 the floor in our bathroom was rotting. A hole about 2 feet by 2 feet between the bathtub and the toilet had opened up. Well, one day I was taking a shit and I hear some squeaky noise like when you push a cart with some rusty bearings. It was coming from the hole. At this point so much shit had happened in this house that I was already trying to get out of the bathroom. Well, before I could pull my pants up I saw this little kid dragging a wheelchair through the crawl space on the other side of the hole. He looked up and saw me. He started trying to climb through the hole as I got the fuck out and closed the door. Never saw him again. Also, when you took a shower, the radio would turn on and play static. Or it'd rapidly switch stations. Once my sister swore it just turned on and started screaming. Then again, when I was 9 or 10, I was taking a piss. At the time, our power was shut off, so it was pitch black. At this point, I'm a huge wreck. I am so fucking terrified of everything that I'm just trying to get in and out. The bathroom was the most haunted room. I was in the process of trying to convince myself that I am insane and it's in my head when I felt a chill go up my spine. I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I heard somebody whisper, "Don't stop." I turned around instantly, spraying piss everywhere. I didn't see anyone and I ran outside and took a piss on a tree. My pants were already covered in piss anyway. It was the only time one talked to me.
Holy shit, how fucking poor were you?
You know those houses on hoarders? I pretty much lived in one of those. My mom didn't hoard anything, but our garbage collection got cut off, so it just piled up. Long story short, my dad got sent to prison for something fucking terrible and my mom broke mentally. She worked at the school as a librarian aide, which got paid barely anything. She had to support 4 children and keep up all utility payments. The house started falling apart. The water line broke, so we went a full year without plumbing and no showers. We were without power for several months at a time at several points in my life. The longest being almost a full year. We didn't have a fridge for most of my childhood. Like I said, my mom broke emotionally. I got a little off track. At work, she kept up appearances somehow. Nobody seemed to notice that she was broken. My siblings and I, however, were noticed. Unable to shower or wash clothes, that shit stood out. My mom would come home and sit in her chair and just sit there. All day. She'd fall asleep in that chair. We didn't even have TV most of the time. This continued for years, until I was about 11 and my dad got out of prison. The only time she really showed any life would be on the holidays and when we were at risk of being taken away from her. Oh yeah. 2 of our dogs starved to death. That one usually hits people pretty hard. Back to the spooky. While living there, I used to have a shitload of dreams about being killed. Like graphically, slowly. I was killed by a shitload of different things. I'd always wake up to the feeling of being punched in the chest. To this day, I still have terrible sleep patterns because in the back of my head I feel like it's gonna start again. When I was like 7, I was playing in my dad's shop and I kept thinking that something was moving behind me. Well, I turned around real fast to look at it and the door was open. I heard a footstep behind me. I turned around and I was knocked over. The door slammed shut and the lights went off. I ended up running into a shitload of things. I bumped into the table saw and turned it on. I didn't get hurt badly, but I got out and never went back in. There was a lot of minor spooky like footsteps in the attic, even though it didn't have a ladder. Doors being opened with nobody home. All of the stove's burners being turned on. Also, once in the crawl space, my brother and I found a hole. A deep fucking hole. Like 6 or 7 feet with a doll at the bottom. I spooked right the fuck out of there by my brother threw the doll away. There was also a bunch of trash in the crawl space. No clue if that was from us though. Like I said, it stopped after we moved, but I still feel them around sometimes. I think it's just my imagination though, because they've never done anything. Funny enough, I don't actually believe in ghosts. I'm half convinced I'm just insane. None of my siblings got it as bad. Just my sister really, even though she thought I was a crybaby.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.